In this episode, I speak with Chiren, the founder of Women of a Certain Stage, an organization leading menopause training and workplace strategy. She's educated over 350,000 people when it comes to her free workshops. She's trained and certified over 1,400 professionals to become menopause champions and coaches, and it was her own personal struggles with menopause over 12 years ago that led her to this career path. So if you are working at a company that perhaps isn't accommodating or supporting menopausal women, or you want to better support someone going through menopause in your workplace, or perhaps you yourself are experiencing menopause, then this episode is for you. Hi, and welcome to Chiren from Women from a Certain Stage to talk through menopause, but with a really special focus on women in the workplace and women in leadership roles. Better supporting women through menopause isn't just the right thing to do, but there's also a really strong economic argument for it. The Government Equalities Office estimates just over £7 million in absent-related costs for women in the UK with severe menopause symptoms. A separate study undertaken from the Department of Work and Pensions estimated that if 0.6 million more women worked full-time, 20 billion could be added to the GDP. So when you think about things like the gender pay gap, menopause support could go a long way in closing that gap there. So before we get into everything, I usually ask this sort of icebreaker health starter question that I believe is a key indicator for women's health. How did you sleep last night, and what's your sleep like generally?
I sleep really well.
Good, that's
Yeah, no,
nice.
that's not an issue. So I sleep 7, 8 hours a night quite comfortably.
Oh, amazing. I did not sleep very well, but I think I was a bit excited for today. All right, let's get into it. So what is menopause?
So menopause is literally, for the majority of people, a natural life stage when we come to the end of our fertility. We're no longer releasing an egg and we stop having a monthly cycle. But because we don't know that's actually happened until however many months after, the doctors say that once we've gone 12 months without a bleed, then we say we're menopausal. And it's just a moment in time, and thereafter we're postmenopausal for the rest of our lives.
And what kind of symptoms are typical for someone going through the menopause or post the menopause?
Sleep issues. In a number of surveys, including a government survey, 81% of people reported sleep as the top symptom that they were being challenged by. And typically people will talk about night sweats, hot flushes, brain fog, anxiety and depression, low mood, and joint aches and pains. But we know that the changes, the metabolic changes, that the hormonal changes that we're going through can impact literally every single aspect of our being, how we think, how we feel, how we behave. So they're not limited to those symptoms, and everybody experiences it really differently.
So getting now straight into menopause in the workplace, I'm really looking forward to asking you a few questions. I have friends going through the menopause or postmenopausal, and they're in some of them really high pressure, stressful jobs. I've got here in front of me a recent national BMS survey found that 47% of those who needed to take off a day of work from menopause symptoms couldn't really tell their employer the real reason why. And the reasons for not disclosing included privacy, embarrassment, and unsupportive manager. How should women be talking about this to their employers or their managers at work?
And I think it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation, because if you're working and living in an environment where menopause isn't a topic that people understand, perhaps the individuals don't know that it's menopause themselves, so they don't feel confident to be able to talk to anybody, let alone a manager at work. If the organisation doesn't have anything menopause related in terms of comms or training or policies or guidance documents, then why would someone want to bring something up that is quite a unique experience? So I think the first thing really is that organisations need to be making sure that they've got policies and guidance documents in place that are both menstruation all the way through our fertility challenges and issues, all the way through to postmenopause savvy and supportive. We need to have training because we're talking about a massive cultural shift. Women are working longer and later now into life than they've ever done before, right across the world. So we need to get the workplace to move with that culturally. We need to be making big changes. And you and I know that culture change doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen from a one-off lunch and learn. So we need to think about our learning and development policies and procedures. We need to think about everything really from our recruitment process, even going back as far as the job design and person spec. Are they created in a way that is really relevant to someone who might be experiencing menopause symptoms, or supporting somebody going through menopause at home? Because equally, it's not just the women that are experiencing menopause or people that are experiencing menopause, but those that are living, working and socialising with them as well. So we need to look at the entire colleague journey. We need to look at line management training. We need to have mechanisms where people can speak up, both confidentially and if they want to speak more publicly in groups and communities like that, then that's fine too. But it's a unique experience that should be respected. But people need to be able to access good information. And sadly, at the moment, there's so much conflicting information out there that workplaces, I think, have a duty of care to make sure that they do let their people know what menopause is and how they can access help and support.
So if women aren't talking about it or aren't saying, oh, I didn't sleep very well last night, or I'm menopausal, how do you see it showing up in the workplace?
It shows up in so many different ways. If I go back to my own experience, I had my son at 37. I carried on working for a number of years, maybe 3 or 4 years, and then got to a point where I found myself sitting in board meetings unable to speak up. My throat was so tight with anxiety, I'd have to sip hot water to be able to say the smallest of sentences in business critical meetings. And other times when I'd look at a colleague, I'd know her name in my head and I could not get it out of my mouth. And it's the most frustrating thing because you really start to doubt your own sanity at that point. You're going, I know this person's name, but I can't quite get the word to come out of my mouth. Or having to make business critical decisions where someone was waiting on a go, no go decision in a program or project that I was managing. And I'd be, let me just double check this and let me just double check that before I could give a decision. So I think it shows up in many different ways for different people. And as I said at the beginning, many people don't sleep well. So if you're not sleeping well, and you think about the fact you're not waking up rested and recovered the next day, maybe you have a massive hot flush before you leave for work. What do? Do you go back and freshen up and then go to work? Or do you just go to work and turn up feeling really uncomfortable in your skin and your clothes? So from the get-go, our day can be really, the rug can feel like it's been pulled out from under our feet at the very beginning of the day. So it shows up very differently for different people. For some people, it will be skin irritations, lack of sleep, joint pain. It might be the brain fog. It might be just that inability to concentrate and retain information. So it is an entirely unique experience. Ultimately left my job believing I had early onset dementia. And only 3 months after I left work, realised that I'd just been through a premature menopause at 37. So, it really does show up very differently for everybody. And I think there's this concept that people go through menopause in their 50s and 60s or maybe late 40s. There might be something going on. But the reality is for a lot of people, symptoms are starting to kick in much earlier than that.
And as you say, there needs to be cultural changes, there needs to be training. What would you say to the women listening to this who want to tell their bosses what they're going through? Would you say to them to be honest, or would you say for them to maybe seek out allies in the workplace and just say, this is what I'm going through?
I think for anybody going through something at work, whether it's menopause or something else, I think the reality is that you have to look after yourself first and foremost. You're no good to anyone else if you're not putting your own health and well-being first. So first of all, if you believe that it's menopause related, read up, but read up from trusted, reliable sources like you mentioned the BMS, the British Menopause Society earlier on. Make sure that you're going to trusted sources of support. Get information. There's an amazing section called the Women's Health Concern on the BMS website, which is the patient section for people to learn. Take that information, make a symptoms list so that you're keeping a note of what are the symptoms you're experiencing and how are they impacting you. Have a look at the NICE guidelines if you're in the UK and understand what support your doctor should be providing for you going forward. And then go and see your doctor. Have a conversation with your symptoms list. Be prepared for a couple of appointments. See what support and help is available from them. And then with all of that information, you're in a much more powerful position to be able to sit down with someone at work, whether it's your manager, a trusted colleague. We train menopause champions, and often they might be the people who've got that friendly listening ear that you could go and speak to, or it might be HR, occupational health. But then you're going armed with solid information and you're going in having shown that you're taking action and that you're being proactive and that you're willing to have that conversation and look at what the potential solutions might be. And your employer, if they're a good employer, they should be looking at reasonable adjustments for you. They should be looking to work with you to navigate this phase as you're transforming your way through it.
Is there something that you've seen in a company that's worked really well that you've been really impressed by and you just thought, wow, that's amazing. More companies need to be doing that particular thing?
Yeah, we've been doing this for 12 years now. So we work with over 350 FTSE and Fortune 500, 400 companies and other organizations too. And best practice is really when you've got everyone understanding what menopause is. But that, as we said, that doesn't happen overnight. So if we can get people who are looking at the learning development journey, the recruitment journey, to be building this into the whole A to Z part of the colleague journey, then that's a great place to be. We want to make sure we've got flags in the HR system to ensure that they are, if someone's off with a menopause absence, that they can actually report it and it's being recorded, because we want organizations to have the metrics so they can analyze the learning and development, the training, the support, the toolkits, the guidance, the policies. They can make an analysis each year to see what's working well. And then when we look at engagement surveys, are they actually capturing the information to make sure that we've got the right information from our colleagues to understand what's working, what's not working, what they like, what they need, what they want, so we can have a really interactive conversation with them and work out the next year's plan and the next year's plan. So the organisations that we've worked with for a number of years are doing that. They have that annual cycle. It's part of the L&D. It's part of everything that they do for their colleagues. This is all baked into what their strategy is going forward, what their senior team's KPIs are, their key performance indicators are going forward. And that way, it just becomes business as usual. So when we get to that point, we know we can start to make a difference. And we know we can stop the incredible number of people that are leaving jobs because they don't feel as if they can speak up. Or if they do speak up, they can't get that help and support.
And I know we just touched on it, but what would you say specifically to women in leadership roles? Do you think that they should be open and honest with their teams about it? Or is that inappropriate? And like you say, just really speak to HR and their sort of bosses?
I don't think it's any different for people in leadership than everyone else. I
Yeah.
think it's a very personal journey and it's entirely up to the individual what they choose to share, whether they want to keep that entirely private or they want to share that with their teams. Then that would come down to probably the same way as they would do with any other life event that was going on. Either they're a personal person that deals with it in their own way, and if there's something they feel they need to share with their team, I'm sure they'll do that in their own way. But again, I don't believe there's a right answer to that. I think it's a really personal journey.
And looking, you do amazing work with both companies and individuals. What would you say has been eye-opening through your own journey, bringing your experience into working with them and also just working with these individuals?
Oh, so many stories. I've got
Yeah.
a decade's worth of feedback and stories. And I graduated my last cohort of menopause coaches a couple of weeks ago at the time of recording this. And in the final session, I always get really emotional when we get to the final few weeks of the diploma. And we go through that session, the feedback that my trainee coaches are getting from their practice clients, right? And you just have to read the relief, the sense of ability to get back to themselves, the just overwhelming feedback that they're getting when they're working with their practice clients is just absolutely mind-blowing. And it's super emotional because these are people that they've gone to work with as a practice client, right? So they're not like a paying client, they're a practice client for these student coaches. And women are coming back saying, I never thought I'd be able to work again. Or, my relationship was on the rocks and now I found a way to speak to my husband. Or I didn't know how to get my doctor to listen to me, kept on fobbing me off, and now I've got a prescription. So all of these things, just by having people that are properly educated, can go and help so many other people. And that for me is it's mind-blowing. Like I couldn't have written that, never planned on being in this journey in the first place. And the other thing, the one that really sticks in my mind is one of my clients, one of my corporate clients, they had a very senior leader who had put their notice in. It was a 6-month notice period. And at that point, they called me up and said, look, we've tried everything. We don't know what else to do. And we think we've lost her. We don't think we can get her back. She'd put her notice in. And they said, can you take her through your coaching program? As part of a farewell, as part of her package to get her set up for success for whatever she went on to do next. 3 months in, she rescinded her notice and she went back to work because she suddenly had the skills and the tools to be able to manage what she was going through and communicate it properly. And that for me is just magic. Stuff like that didn't exist when I went through my own journey. And if I can help people create that for their people, for their colleagues, then I think that's a step in the right direction. So that for me is where the magic really happens.
Thinking about your personal journey, obviously that inspired to do what you do. Can you share a little bit about that and how it's brought you to do what you do?
Yeah, I was 6 months pregnant. I was offered termination. My partner left. I was 37 and I was, my world turns upside down, right? You don't know what you're doing. But I was not able to go through with the termination, decided to carry on because at that time I was huge. I was huge. I put on 5 stone when I was pregnant. I got absolutely massive. And I was working as a personal trainer and sports therapist, nutritional advisor at the time, traveling all over the world with celebrity clients and different people like that. And I just couldn't come to terms with the concept that I wouldn't go through this pregnancy. And as the days and weeks and final couple of months, as it turned out, went on and I got bigger and bigger, I could only focus on one day at a time. And I was told the baby wouldn't make the pregnancy. We didn't get to 9 months. and that he probably wouldn't survive natural birth. We'd end up not having a natural birth. And that if he did come out alive, that probably I would only have hours with him. I'm delighted to say my son's about to turn 19, but I just add that in very quickly because I know that can be quite triggering for some people. And at the time, I was a sole parent with a child with lifelong medical needs, living in the children's hospital, going to work during the day, sleeping in the hospital overnight. And as a result of a lifestyle where I'd been traveling a lot with clients, I now needed to work and more 9 to 5 job or something where I could be near the hospital. So I went back into corporate and I ended up working in financial services, became very senior very quickly. But that was when, everything went really well work-wise. And it was like I had this big trajectory of from entry level to senior very quickly overnight, still sleeping in the hospital and then going to work during the day. And at the time, obviously, with all of these other things going on, you're focused on feeding the baby, getting to work, having clean clothes to wear every day, trying to get enough nutrients in your body to feed the baby. And I guess you just get into survival mode, especially when you've got no one at home to help with that. And eventually, as I said, got to the point where I'm sitting in board meetings unable to speak up. And in my head, I'm thinking, I'm someone that thrives on stress. And I didn't feel like I was stressed. I didn't feel like that was what was going on with me, but I knew something was wrong. And having watched my grandmother pass away from Alzheimer's, I started thinking maybe I've got early onset dementia. And that was why I left my job. I didn't want to be seen as weak. I didn't want to be seen as vulnerable. And I'd rather leave and try and figure it out and find someone to look after my son and somewhere for me to rock in the corner of a home somewhere. And then my doctor I was amazingly blessed to have a phenomenal doctor. And by the third appointment, I had been the first time he said Lomid, second time did bloods, third time offered me hormone replacement therapy and got it really quickly. And given that I was in my early 40s, he nailed it. He absolutely nailed it. And we think that what happened was I had my son at 37 and went straight into menopause because I never had another bleed. Didn't know because I fed my son for a year. Typically don't have a bleed when you're feeding. And then I was on the contraceptive pill that meant I didn't have a breakthrough bleed. So it was all done in symptoms. The day that I was in the surgery and he said it was nothing sinister, you've just been through premature menopause, I was like punching the air with joy going, yes, it's just menopause. Because I knew enough about it. I've got anatomy and physiology, psychology background with everything else. I was like, if I didn't know about menopause and I've got like all of this experience working in human performance, what chance have other people got? Or maybe I'm just the only one. And that was when I just set out to find other people and to talk to other women that were going through menopause. And I started up a local group called Menopause Socials, got people together on the first Sunday of every month, and then started discovering that people really didn't know what menopause was. Started studying through the BMJ, the BMS, everyone that would let me onto any courses before they found out I wasn't a medic. And so things rumbled forward. Women of a Certain Stage came about because one of the people that was coming to the Menopause Socials asked me to go and talk to their organisation and let them know what would I like to have seen in my company when I was going through my experience that might have helped support me instead of me just leaving. And that was the beginning of me starting to work with organizations because I went on social media and one company saw another and so the snowball. And here we are nearly 12 years later and working all over the world, having worked with the British Standards Institute to create the landmark standard from menstruation to menopause. Now work in the International Standardization Organization. And yeah, it's just the opportunities have been amazing and I couldn't have written this. There's been no business plan. It's just been whatever's felt like the right thing to do to help make a difference and help avoid any other person going through what I went through because nobody should go through that with or without a newborn. Nobody should go through that. This is 2020 something or 2030 something when someone's listening to this. So I think that it's just about we need to change the culture. We need to make sure we're getting up-to-date, accurate information. And so I work with experts all over the world to make sure that what we're delivering is bang up-to-date and accurate as far as we know.
Wow, thank you so much. An amazing example of a woman doing incredible things under impossible circumstances. And I'm sure that experience has really helped you help a lot of women through what you do now. That's incredible. Looking at your psychology background and your background in nutrition, is that part of what you help women do as well, along with all the other coaching that you do?
I think a lot of the stuff we do is workplace training and then we do talks to raise awareness. And the courses that we run, I'm really passionate about not saying that I'm a qualified personal trainer or a nutritional advisor or any of these things. I'm not working in those fields today. So I bring the experts in who are working in those fields related to menopause, so they're bang up to date and current. It would be very easy for me to say, I'm a personal trainer, I'm a nutritional advisor, I've got a degree in psychology, and then use what I learned back in 1985 to try and inform what I'm doing today. But that wouldn't be accurate and that wouldn't be current. And I can't possibly, nobody can keep on top of all of those areas and stay current and up to date in all of those areas at all times to be able to make sure that everything you're putting out into the world is up to date. And I've obviously got a strong enough background to know that I'm working with the right people. So from the organisation point of view, it's about having the right people. It's about staying current, up to date, maintaining our library. We have a massive library from A to Z of everything from ADHD and menopause all the way through to sex and menopause and beyond. So we want to make sure that we're getting the best and most current and up-to-date information so that we're informing our clients using that.
What can young women think about what is ahead of them in this way and how they're supporting other women in the workplace? What can they be thinking about now looking ahead?
When we start changing the conversation, we know that the generation coming through now are not going to tolerate a lot of what my generation is tolerating or has tolerated. We also recognise now that there is much more longevity ahead of us in a way that I don't think the conversation has been around before. So we've been living long and, well, living short really and dying long. So we get to maybe our 50s and 60s and then we're on lots of medications. We're not living our best and healthiest lives. And we're living for a long old time doing that. What I'm finding with the younger women we work with, and we work with girls from 14, 15, 16, all the way through to university and first workplaces and beyond. So what we're noticing is they're much more conscious about what they're consuming food-wise, what they're consuming alcohol-wise, what they're doing recreationally, generally. We noticing that there is much more of a shift to dry bars rather than consuming as much alcohol. We're noticing more activity. And this is really interesting because obviously this is what we're seeing, and yet we know there's an obesity crisis on the side of that as well. So we've got this kind of dual situation going on. I can't think.
Oh, yeah, the tension between,
Like you've got one side of really unhealthy and one side being super healthy.
Yeah.
So the people we're working with, we're noticing that they are being more mindful of their health. And I think that we need to be hydrating. We need to be eating the best possible nutrients that we can afford and staying away from processed foods and fast foods. I think with the younger women, I think it's just raising awareness about what's ahead of you. And one of the ways that we tackle it is that we look at, especially if you're in the workplace, so we're looking at what is your career trajectory? Do you know where you want to go or what you want to do? Is a family part of that? Do you know that this thing called perimenopause and menopause is ahead of you and that there is premature menopause, early menopause, and you might become menopausal for a number of other reasons as well? So I think there's a gentle bit of education that's done in an age-appropriate way and stage-appropriate way, but also having people be mindful of their own fertility, especially if they're looking to have children themselves or have a family. So there's that aspect of it. So they become more mindful and more planful going forward. And there's so many more options now as well that are available if you want to have a family later in life too. So we just want to have people be consciously thinking about these things, having the conversations with their employer as well about how they might be able to support them through fertility issues or challenges or just time out of work if they are looking to have family. So that's a big part of what we do. But every single part of that is about us having a positive mindset. And I know that in the Western world, people are still kind of like, well, once you're menopausal, you're over the hill. You're that little grey old lady that's no longer viable in society, which couldn't be further from the truth. So we need to change those concepts about menopause and completely change the narrative and recognise that when we become menopausal, we're actually stepping into the second power where we don't have to worry about all the stuff that comes with problematic periods and all the other stuff that goes on with that actually we've got all the skills, knowledge and experience to be able to transform workplaces, communities and our lives in general. So it's painting that better picture so it doesn't become this dreaded thing that happens when we get much older. We also want younger women to be conscious of how they can support their mothers or their aunts and other women in their life, their boss at work. If they're going through this thing, if everyone is knowledgeable, it becomes much easier to have conversations and to create a circumstance, an environment where people can really thrive.
That's really interesting. I think around the narrative, is there language that we should be avoiding when we talk about it, or is that overthinking it too much?
One of the key things, if you're in the workplace, again, when I'm working with each of my clients, we create everything bespoke for every client we work with. So it's very important to us that we're aware of their gendered language, where they're at on their diversity and inclusion journey, Often simple things like talking about people going through menopause rather than saying women going through menopause, because we want to be mindful of our transgender male population, non-binary, gender questioning colleagues as well. So from that point of view, if you're in the workplace, then we're looking at things like that. There is definitely an aspect of, if we're going into the things we're talking about before about nutrition, movement, it's using words like eating, nutrition, and not talking about diet. It's talking about things like activity and movement and not talking about exercise, because we know so many women have got triggers around the latter. And we just got to be really careful about that when we're talking to people, and how we look at those conversations and make sure they're as inclusive as possible, but also recognizing people's confidentiality as well.
Yeah. Because I can imagine, I feel like women go through such an identity change so many times in their life. And this is just another example of
Yeah.
where your identity doesn't completely change, but things that sort of shift. And you said before about how you left that job because you didn't want to be seen as weak and not on the top of your game. Sometimes women are very guilty of not being so kind to themselves and putting a lot of pressure on themselves. Is there one piece of advice that you'd give someone who might be struggling through this at the moment? If you could just say one thing to them, what would that be?
Reach out and ask for help and support, even if that is just a moment to talk to a good friend. If you haven't got a good friend because you've poured your heart and soul into your work and your family and there isn't one person there to listen to you, then, go and see your doctor, phone a helpline, but find someone to talk to. You're not alone. 1.2 billion women are going through this right now with you. And we absolutely don't want you to feel like you're alone or there's no one to talk to. It's really important that you reach out. We don't all have someone there to listen to us, and that's pretty normal, sadly. But we really strongly encourage you to pick up that phone line, go to see your doctor, find a local community support group, even find someone to speak to in work, or set up a group at work. You'll be amazed at how many people will show up and just are in exactly the same position and desperately want someone to speak to. And it's a real leveler, because it doesn't matter whether you are an entry-level position or a senior position. When we get people into a group, that is irrelevant. It's about being a human being that's going through a big, major life transition, whether it's medically, surgically induced, or a completely natural menopause. So definitely reach out and support each other.
Yeah, I really love that. I think there's, like you say, be that person for someone else if you can't find that person. I know we said that neurodiverse women is a whole podcast in itself, but have you seen neurodiverse women deal with the menopause slightly different, slightly better? Or what have you found with the people that you've worked with?
I'm smiling because every cohort we start with the menopause coaches, I always ask people about their learning style and how I can best support them on the journey. And I'll get one or two people that say to me, oh, I'm ADHD or I'm ADD. I'm like, okay, tell me more. How's your way of dealing with it? How do you cope with it? What additional support do you need? By the time we get halfway through the program, we've got at least a third of the program that are saying they're either self-diagnosed or since they've joined the program, they've become diagnosed. And it's fascinating. So is there enough research on neurodiversity and menopause? Absolutely not. But there's a lot of research in flow at the moment. So it'll be interesting to see what comes out from that. What have I personally witnessed? I've seen people just get really structured about how they manage things for themselves. So lots of different mechanisms, from one of my clients, her entire wall in her study is just post-it notes of different colors. So as she's doing an activity, the colors change along the wall. Others have got alarms on their phone. Other people just voice note everything and then have to set another alarm to make sure they go back and listen to the voice notes. But everyone's just got different ways of coping with it and different ways that it's affecting them as well. So I think what I've noticed is that menopause can exacerbate, or it could be that when we're going through menopause, it's the first time we're paying attention to that's what we're experiencing. So I'm really excited to see what comes out in the research. But there's such a range of neurodiversity that I don't think it's going to be something that we learn an awful lot about overnight. So watch this space.
I imagine a lot of these people try and mask it and then they have to come to terms with it and really open their eyes to it in order to work with you on something like this.
Yeah.
How can partners better support women and people going through the menopause or early menopause?
Oh, this is a real test of a relationship, right? So we want to, personally, the people going through menopause want to find the language to be able to make that communication. And often it will be our partner or a colleague that will notice that something's changed in us, that they'll notice we're perimenopausal or menopausal before we even know ourselves, specifically perimenopausal. And that's always quite interesting. because they're starting to notice that you're behaving differently, thinking differently, reacting differently to regular situations. So they're obviously starting to go, what's going on here? So their mind can go into all sorts of different places. Are they having an affair? Do they not love me anymore? What's going on? Something happening that they're not talking to me about. There's so many different ways that your partner can think. And this is why we need to learn about menopause, right? So to people who are living with somebody going through menopause, first of all, we don't want to be fixed. I think that the last thing we want is to be fixed. We want to be listened to. We want to be held. We want to be supported. And the confusing thing for our partners is what we said yesterday, what we want, might change tomorrow. In fact, it could change within an hour. So we want to make sure we're having really good conversations. So I always say to partners, look, first of all, learn about it. Learn the basics. Go on a free course. Go on to the British Menopause Society Women's Health Concern. There's many different courses that people can go on. So learn about it, first of all. Secondly, speak to your partner. And if, it's tricky to have a conversation at home, they're getting distracted or they're avoiding the conversation, it might be because they've not really made that connection themselves. It might be that they're not ready to accept that they're perimenopausal or menopausal because of some of the perceptions around that. So go for a walk out in nature. Go somewhere where generally our central nervous systems are that little bit calmer. And maybe if you can, leave the phones at home. I know that's not always possible, and there's many reasons why we carry our phones with us 24/7. But get outside, have a walk, have a chat, and share how you're feeling and how you're feeling about what's going on at home, and make it about you rather than about them. So talk about how you've noticed some changes and how it's impacting you, and just open up an opportunity for your partner to talk to you and to share with you. And over time, you just want to keep repeating that in different ways. Maybe you want to go out for a meal. Maybe you want to go and do something together where you don't have distractions so you can have the conversation. But try and make it about you and what you're noticing and feeling rather than about making it about them, because it's not a blame and it's not a lot that they can do about going through menopause, but there is a lot you can do as a couple to be able to navigate this transition together. But listen, don't fix, be there, be supportive. It's a passing phase. It might be a long passing phase, but it's a passing phase that's going to be a lot better when you work together on it. And relationships on the other side of menopause are so super strong. It's incredible. So there's definitely a lot that you can do, but that's where I would start.
There is a lot of misconceptions when it comes to the menopause. What are the biggest sort of myths and misconceptions that you see when it comes to the menopause?
Oof. Where to start with that one? I think the key one is that you're past it and you're over the hill. And people forget that, 100 years ago, we were going through menopause late 50s and dying in our 60s. We're going through menopause in our mid 40s to mid 50s now, and we're living till our 83, 84, 85 on average. So we're in menopause for between a third to half of our adult life. So there is so much that we've got. So, as I said before, we've got so many skills, knowledge, and experience that we've got incredible amounts to offer. And that's the biggest single shift I think we need to make, because we're living so much longer now and we're going to be postmenopausal, and we can contribute in a way that people can't even conceive at the moment. So that's the biggest thing that I think we need to just get cognizant of just how much longer we're living and how incredibly amazing everyone going through this stage of life, and what a gift it is to be able to get to this stage of life as well. Personally, you could not have paid me to sit down in front of a microphone and a camera, let alone get on stage and talk in front of thousands of people before I went through menopause. Now, doesn't matter what people think of what I look like or sound like, but if someone can take one nugget away that it makes a difference to their life or someone else's life, my job is done. And that's what becomes important as well. There are so many things about aging that we could probably talk about for hours, but it's really just changing the narrative and showing what at every stage of our life we contribute something. And we've got so much that we can contribute at this time.
Yeah, touching on that a little bit more, you're saying goodbye to one phase of your life, but you're moving into this really wise, reflective, as you say, contributing so much phase. What does it mean for you as a woman, the menopause? Like, what did that mean for you?
It's really random. I never ever gave it much thought. Obviously, I went through what I went through, which gave me pause for a minute. And then I realized that I actually went through it and didn't know I'd been through it because of the circumstances at the time. So I feel like I was robbed of the experience in some respect. But I got the tail end of the rough stuff, which was interesting. What does it mean for me? It means confidence. It means stepping into my power. It means regaining vitality in a way that I never imagined I would interpret vitality before. It's a freedom. It's a real freedom of worrying about what other people think about. It's an opportunity to really go and do whatever you want to do on your own terms. And that for me is something a younger me would never have considered doing, because I was the absolute people pleaser. And I wouldn't be happy unless everybody around me was happy. And then we all know we can't make everyone happy all the time. So I was in a bit of a hiding to nothing with that. But that was how I was. I worried about everything. And I wasn't a worrier as in anxious, but I was always like, is this okay? Is that okay? Has this been done? I'd always be like double checking everything all the time. I'm like, take me or leave me. I'm either fit or I don't. And I think knowing that none of us gets on with everybody and we all attract our own people is such a relief, because now I don't worry about the people that are not a good fit to work with or not good people to hang out with. I just get to do what feels right for me and the people I'm with. And that is priceless.
I want to end on a question here about how you're feeling about menopause in the workplace, the future of women's health in that respect. Like, how are you feeling about that? You think we're moving in the right direction? Are you feeling hopeful, positive?
Ooh, it's so tied in with our healthcare, right? And that makes it quite a difficult question to answer. Yes, we're moving in the right direction because we're having more conversations. The government's involved. We've potentially got the Menopause Action Plans coming up. Globally, we're seeing over 15 states pushing legislation through in the US as well. So we know there's a lot of action happening around the world. So from that point of view, very hopeful. I've been involved with the BSI and the ISO standards, so that's massive as well. Then we look at the healthcare and the support that's actually available for us in the current times, and it's still really limited. There are huge waiting lists. And that's the bit that just leaves me wishing we could do something. We've got some amazing women like Dame Professor Leslie Regan who have pushed forward with so many great initiatives, but they just haven't been able to see them all the way through for a variety of reasons. So there's a lot of work still to be done. We're definitely moving in the right direction. The conversations are happening. We just need the healthcare to catch up and really be there to give us rock solid support as well.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. I feel like you've just given so much advice and so much insight and some really practical tips as well. We'll make sure that everyone has your details and they know where to get more information about you and everything that you do. So thank you so much.
Thank you.